stereotype that infertility primarily occurs among white, wealthy women, but in reality, it is a slightly higher prevalence of infertility among poor women and poor women of color in particular. This is for many various reasons. There's different causes for infertility between wealthier women and between poorer women. So, for instance, sexually transmitted infections, STIs, many times cause infertility among poorer women and women of color. So the stereotype that we have in terms of reproduction in general, right? So this idea that infertility or the difficulty of becoming pregnant and having children primarily occurs among white wealthy women. And then in contrast to that, we also have a stereotype that poor women are sort of hyperfertile, right? That they have too many children. And so these ideas have shaped social policy throughout our history. So for instance, we've had policies to almost prevent abortions among white wealthy women to encourage them to have children. And then we have policies such as those incorporated into our welfare system that discourage poor women and women of color from having children. By the medical treatment being so expensive for infertility and many times not being covered by insurance, what happens is then that we sort of reinforce this idea of who should have kids and who shouldn't have kids. The majority of research and literature on infertility recruited, understandably, women from medical clinics. They're an easier sample to get. People who go to fertility clinics usually have a fertility problem, and so it's a sample ready at the home for you to recruit. The problem with doing that is that there's a certain type of population that usually is able to go to a fertility medical clinic, and those tend to be wealthier individuals and white individuals. So you end up perpetuating the stereotype that infertility primarily occurs among white wealthy women. I was trying to avoid that for a couple of reasons. Primarily, I wanted a more diverse sample. I was interested in poor women's experiences of infertility, and they wouldn't be represented in that medical clinic sample. So in order to do that, I had to come up with a different recruitment technique and mechanism. And so I just recruited and posted flyers in various locations and public spaces like libraries and grocery stores, gymnasiums, fitness clubs. But then I also specifically targeted low-income venues, such as laundromats perhaps, food banks, even homeless shelters. And it was almost easier for me to recruit the low socioeconomic status women than the high SES women, which I was surprised by. But both came forward relatively easily for me.